Hi. Hello, everybody. Who is here for the morning in track 3 for one of the sessions? Who's returning? Amazing. The cool room. Okay, so we are continuing with data and AI-enabled GTM strategies. I am so excited to announce our next speaker. I've heard raving reviews about him this morning. We're going to be talking about demand science evolution, turning predictive data into always-on pipeline generation. I would like to welcome up Arthur Silva. Yep, perfect. Arthur Silva, Senior Vice President, Head of Digital Engagement and MarTech Solutions, Fidelity Institutional. Welcome.
All right. Thanks, Kate. All righty. Let's see. Hopefully, it's funny. My first concern was going to be that the title of this thing scared people from actually joining, but I'm going to break it down and make it hopefully simple, digestible, actionable. One point of context as I dive in, the part of Fidelity that I lead digital within is really geared towards, in the institutional space, either accredited institutional investor or marketing through advisors. So I say that because you're going to get like a B2B2C vibe in some of what I'm talking about, although I think the concepts hold true for B2C or maybe just B2H. We're humans. So I just wanted to share that by way of context. The other thing that I wanted to share in terms of a framework for the discussion is I hope to be able to talk about lead generation, which is how I think about filling the funnel for our sales teams, in both a predictive, yes, as per the title, but also in a practical way. I'm a competitive tennis player. I don't know how many tennis players are out there, or maybe pickleball is the more popular one now. I'm a purist on the tennis front, but I'm teaching my son. He's a high schooler, and you don't start by talking about like a slice kick serve. You start with like a basic forehand, right? So I want to make sure I cover the basics of what I think lead gen is still all about, and some of the more advanced predictive capabilities in that space. Then I want to talk about what you do with leads in an intelligent, data-driven way, and ideally in an automated way, because we all have constraints within our digital marketing teams. And so automated, repeatable nurturing of leads, I think is pretty critical. And then lastly, but maybe most importantly, none of it really works without alignment. So I'm going to talk about unification of sales, marketing, digital within it, data and technology, both from an integration standpoint, but also from a very human standpoint, because ultimately people are running the business, and you need to make sure you're well aligned. You can't let the fancy things we do run it all for you without the right connections. So coming back to the practical, in our business, in our experience, the data still tells us that before you get to predictive, you better get search right. And actually, I was glad that Kate presented earlier and started with a great use case around smart search or smart search strategy, because ultimately, it's not just about figuring out what keywords are interesting. It's about figuring out which ones you can potentially own. It's about figuring out which ones that you can differentiate what you deliver if your search keywords work. And ultimately, I look at this little bubble here to say, don't mess around where your competitor is better than you, or where they're outspending, or you can't touch their spend on the paid side, or even on the SEO front. If you think about where you're doing well, but it's not an interesting area of research that your potential prospects or your clients are doing, don't go there either. Look for the opportunity as the starting point of your lead generation, right where you have this really smart overlap between what your potential prospects or clients are looking for, searching for, and what you offer, both in terms of capability and in terms of really rich content. I think this applies to SEO, SEM, and increasingly, maybe in a year from now, I'm going to be starting by talking about AI SEO or generative AI-based search, because I think that's quickly predominantly taking over as the place where people start. And I'm assuming that you all share this starting point from the perspective of searching for an answer to a question. We almost all predominantly start in search. So if you get your search strategy right, and you can use tools and technologies to help refine your search keywords, and then you should make sure the other half of the practical lead gen equation which is make sure all your content is well optimized for search where you want to play, and is also I like to start with debatable concepts, right? Some people, you could look up, gated content is dead. I don't think so, not yet anyway, okay? For us, it still works so long as, caveat, so long as you do two things right. One, you make sure that it's really meaningful, rich content that is in high need, right? Don't gate Me Too content, don't gate basic stuff. If you have some really, really interesting research, if you have some piece of content that you know is going to be highly valuable, okay, it could be gate-worthy, but the second thing is make it as frictionless as possible. Because all you're really trying to do is feed the machine with a connection between the who, basic contact information, let's say email address, and the what they're searching for or interested in. In this particular case, we're talking about an advisor, could also be an investor, trying to understand, how do I throw alternatives in the mix of my portfolios? Currently, I have none. Where do I start? How much should I put in there? You want to keep it simple, but start to connect attributes about the people that are searching for solutions and who they are, so that you can actually get after that more predictive side of the equation. Okay, so that's a good pivot. So let's get to the slice serve now. Some of the more complex stuff. I guess actually just out of curiosity, so I know a baseline. How many of you all are doing something in the realm of data modeling for predictive marketing? Just by show of hands. Okay, a few. Predominantly new topic, I think. Okay, so think about it this way. There's a technical definition of what it means on the slide, but that's not as interesting as, let's say, bringing it to life and bringing some color to it. Fundamentally, predictive lead generation is looking back at all of the data you have available. Where did you generate leads previously, the ones that were quality and converted well? What data do you have, first party or third party, about your either prospects, again, that you're capturing through your outbound and inbound digital efforts, or your database. Your database is your gold mine, or databases, I should say, because you have lots of different data that you can bring into your environment. And what you're basically doing is looking back and saying, are there attributes and or behaviors that start to look like your ideal prospect's behavior before they became prospects? So you're looking for signals. You're looking for, and the signals could be positive or negative signals, right? Retention is as important as lead generation. In many ways, I think it's more important. It costs, everybody knows, it costs a whole lot more money to gain a new client than it is to keep one. You can look at data attributes and behavioral attributes, engagement attributes, and I don't mean just marketing. I want to be very clear about this. I'm talking about all the data you have. It could be service interactions. It could be sales interactions. It could be digital engagement interactions with your efforts across webinar, search, email, you name it. Could have attended a live event. It doesn't really matter. All of that, if you contextualize it, you can look back on it and come up with hypotheses. Meaning, when this person does the following things over a 30, 60, 90-day period of time, it typically leads to the following. So why don't we start marketing the following to that individual? Now, in the case of advisors that we tend to target more often, there are channels that are old school but still super reliable, email being one of the most predominant. So when someone's known and they meet the criteria in a behavioral or propensity model, and we start marketing to them, just so you can see the kind of proof in the pudding here, we typically get either 2 or 3x the amount of open and click rates in that email, because it's right moment, right time, right message, right time. The right time part is probably the most critical from this kind of predictive perspective. You can't do this alone. The number one takeaway that you're going to see towards the later part of the presentation is my best friend is on my right is the gentleman who runs advanced analytics for our business. To my left is sales, right? The sales leadership. You cannot do this on your own. You need to be tapping into the whole wealth of data that surrounds your, again, prospect and client environment. Okay, so let's say you're generating leads through your search efforts, through your paid efforts, or through these fancy predictive models, which, by the way, in our world, when we come up with a hypothesis and we define what we refer to as like a lookalike, this person looks like the ideal prospect tomorrow, we run batches, right? So overnight, we keep running this data profile, this propensity model in a batch cycle, and every time you run it, new people pop in, and you need to be ready at that moment in time to activate. And that's where, amidst all the marketing technology that we all use in our marketing and sales tech stacks, there are a range of them, right? I won't go through what all of them are. The one to me that sits at the foundation, that works as the hub of orchestration, the maestro of it, is your marketing automation system, okay? I think every piece of it is critical, but we really lean into marketing automation as two things. One, the way to activate in real time. Somebody meets the criteria, they drop into the set of the target audience for a particular nurture stream, which is cross-channel, all different types of content, paid and direct. And we activate that, and then it starts to learn as it goes. So your marketing automation system works. I don't know if anybody ever read the Choose Your Own Adventure books back in the day. Anybody, maybe? Okay, I was a total Dungeons and Dragons geek, so Choose Your Own Adventure books were awesome. But the marketing automation system kind of works that way, except intelligently. So when people start to engage with your content, the system is learning, it's watching, it's waiting a certain amount of time, it's activating the next thing. If people don't take the desired action, it puts them on a different track, a different train, if you will, and starts activating. And it's doing things in real time that are smart, right? It's changing the time that it sends because there's send time optimization built in. It's doing dynamically featured content. So you have templatized emails or templatized social posts, templatized advertisement, and the content, literally because your predictive model said, this is the topic, this is the angle, it pulls in the relevant content dynamically and pushes it in a personalized way. All that can be built in and connected between predictive as a trigger and your marketing automation system as the coordinated maestro, so to speak. So let me put it all together. I think use cases help, or they bring things to life. So no matter whether you're talking about your search-driven audience, right, that critical starting point for lead generation, or this concept of a predictive lookalike audience. And again, the predictive lookalike audience, I was talking about it earlier, but here are several examples, right? You can see potentially the preferences that that person has selected in your content preference center. What do they like to receive? Do they like to hear about market insights? Do they like to hear about trends? Are they more interested in just product content? You could also look at their book of business data, which we do. Are they a mutual fund shop, again, as an advisory firm? Are they leaning big time into ETFs? Do they tend to lean into active or passive? All this stuff is just wonderful contextual data that allows you to say, this is our ideal target audience, okay, within our data set. So you put those two in the mix in a nurturing plan, and what's interesting is the nurturing plan can have entrance points from different starting points. It doesn't have to always be this linear process. So taking that search example and taking the example of active ETF, right? So why active ETF? Why now? This is a hot topic amongst advisors discussing this movement of mutual fund money to ETF. So again, you could take a search strategy and optimize your keywords for a particular piece of content that you know will help you initially capture some names. You can put that into the funnel, or excuse me, into your database of names you already have where you're running this nightly propensity model, okay? These two things combined allow you to start doing very targeted, hyper-personalized, like real-time advertising, direct digital marketing, and again, keep informing the machine keeps learning as it goes. So maybe you start with a personalized social post advertisement. Or if you have that contact, you might actually send them a broad reach email like, hey, check out where ETFs can take you today. When they engage, if they engage, let's say they do, right? You can see with what, because you have that intelligence and that predictive model also looking at the site properties that are associated with this particular experience. And when they come and explore, they might actually go the path of bond ETFs. So now you're like, okay, don't make the mistake of continuing to message equity-based ETFs. If what they're really researching is bond ETFs, cool, let's go a click further, right? And start to give them more targeted message around bond ETF. Then they engage with the site a second time, and your system's like, ooh, I think they're probably further down the buying cycle. Maybe we should start talking to them about the performance of our ETFs, right? Certainly don't start there, right? But you're going to get there eventually. And then, actually, it was great to follow the deep dive into webinars for whoever joined the last session, because webinars is a really, really meaningful, like, rich way to engage. So if somebody actually does all that and then signs up for your active ETF topical webinar with some of your subject matter experts, it might be time for a phone call, right? The worst thing you can do, though, is treat this like a one-size-fits-all. And the even worse thing you can do is call them too soon, because none of us want that phone call until we say, wow, super timely. I was really giving this a lot of thought. I've been doing some research. Now, our wholesalers that are talking to advisors are like, I already know that. I know exactly what you looked at. Yeah, that you got to watch out for the creepy factor. But in reality, we do. You can know, right? Okay. I think this concept, by the way, applies not only to lead generation and nurturing the quality of the leads through, but I think this idea of activating what I call nurturing playbooks. I use sports analogies too much, I know, but I think it applies in a lot of different ways. And you can be thinking about whether it's predictively driven or trigger-based, like an action happens, a rebalancing of a portfolio, or a redemption risk, like we can see the signs or symptoms of someone getting out of a fund too soon. Or on the flip side, positive things like be ready for life events, positive and negative ones, birth, marriage, divorce. Pre-program a content experience, have it ready, and have it work in that same smart, kind of insightful learning way so that it becomes this rinse and repeat, right? You learn from it, you go back and you tweak the model, you go back and you tweak the experience, you go back and you tweak the content, but you have this concept of stable, repeatable, which means sort of self-correcting, okay? So think about this concept more broadly than just lead generation, okay? The last thing I mentioned, but again, I think in a lot of ways the most critical piece of the puzzle, especially in B2B. If we're talking e-commerce, clearly a little bit of a different game here. But if you are talking about the necessity for human touch at some point, which again, most oftentimes in our business we are, you have got to be thinking about the orchestration of the dance and make sure both the client experience is felt in a way that the left hand and right hand know what each other are doing. If I go rewind the clock, I remember sitting down with our sales leader and was like, we just had a phone call with an advisor talking about like the benefits of this particular strategy, this particular set of products and capabilities. So we had him kind of down the path already. And you guys sent him this thing that completely countered it. It was literally the opposing message, because ultimately we want to make sure we're serving all advisors, all investors, all clients with optionality. But it was really poorly timed. So left hand and right hand, sales and marketing, you got to know when there is a touch digitally versus human, sales and marketing, that they're informing each other, okay? So the other piece that I would say is equally critical in the lead gen game. I've been doing the demand gen, lead gen thing for a long time. I've seen this interesting evolution, but there's one thing that has always stayed constant, which is you sure as heck better agree on what good looks like. You need to sit down with your sales team and describe what an ideal lead consists of. What are the attributes of it? How ready do they need to be? Also, what are the disqualifiers? Like, just because we're seeing the right level of engagement with things and we're all excited about scoring that lead high, it could be that that's not a ideal prospect. It's just not somebody we'd want to put human energy against. So you have to really think smart about that criteria, the criteria that moves from stages to stages, and you have to actually systemize that learning and that alignment between sales and marketing so that you can actually work the funnel together. And by the way, apply machine learning to the funnel. Okay, and we'll talk about that right towards the end here. Same goes for the integration of the process itself, right? So once you align between sales, marketing, and advanced analytics and the underlying technology teams, you need to make sure that you have that systemized so that the health of that process, the health of that workflow can be measured, right? So you're turning things on that are both automated, predictive, triggered, and so you don't have direct control there. You have to watch on the other end to see if the funnel is bottlenecking somewhere, if you're sending in too much volume, not enough quality, or too much quality and not enough volume to hit targets. And so you have to stay in constant contact, again, as a cross-functional team between sales, marketing, and data. So every stage of the process can have areas where things are falling through the cracks, or areas where you need to tighten the criteria, or again, turn the volume up, right? If things are working well through the entire thing, and your sales team is like, give me more, give them more, okay? And here's what that might look like. One of the things we do is widen the aperture of our view. I'm not interested in just the quality of what my teams do. My teams are awesome, and they do incredible work, but I'm interested in what the sales team is benefiting from at large. And there are many lead sources. It's too narrow to only think about marketing lead source. So you need to be part of the dialogue of all lead source analysis. How is the conversion rate of inbound phone calls, or referrals from an aggregator, or peer-to-peer referral? And then also break it down within marketing. How well are your different activations going, your digital campaigns, your events, your webinars? Look at all the relative conversion, and then ultimately play together. Like, have fun with the dials. Because I always look at these three dials, like the way you score and also the criteria, the strictness of your criteria and your predictive models, all of that can be played with. It's literally like machine dials. So you turn some things up, you turn some things down, and you see the correlation, like what happens if. And you come up with learning agenda, what we call in our business learning agenda hypotheses, and say, what do we think would happen if this, or else that? And you play this game of creating experiments that change the system. You watch what comes out the other end, you talk about it, you change it back, or you double down. It's a bit of an art and a science in my experience. The last thing I wanted to talk about, which is something that we're actually on the cusp of, is I use the term criteria probably 10 times in the conversation. There's criteria associated with your creation of a lookalike model, a data model for your ideal prospects. There's criteria associated with lead scoring in your whatever system you're using for lead scoring. I think where things are heading is even that goes from criteria-based, which is still pretty cool, modern-ish, but also you could call traditional, versus the next wave, which is actually predictive lead scoring. So instead of rules-based, instead of thinking about the results of what you're tweaking, actually make sure or get to a point where the lead scoring system is learning from itself, right? It's looking at the data associated with quality. It's looking at the funnel analytics and conversion rates. It's looking at like the through time, right, to get from stage to stage. And it's deciding what to boost up and boost down. And do it not just for marketing generated leads. Do it for all leads. So this concept of predictive lead scoring, I think, is where some of the demand gen efforts, integrated sales and marketing demand gen efforts, are heading. But I also think, crawl, walk, run. So again, using my tennis analogy, start with the basics. Get your forehand right, get your backhand right, get your overhead serve, and then start going crazy, okay? Doing cool and experimental things. I did pretty good on time. Let me pause. I think, is it okay if I if there's any question for a minute? Okay. Questions, and if not now, I'm happy to take questions after. Yes, Rick.
How much data do you need to make your predictive analytics work? Does this work at a small firm, or does it need to be at a large firm like Fidelity?
I actually think the answer to that is first and foremost that the quality of your data is more important than the quantity. So if you have good, I'll say, data hygiene and not large volumes of data, I think you can still make an impact in this way. But if you have quality and quantity, and a Fidelity, I will say, is unique in that we have workplace investing, retail, personal investing, tens, hundreds of millions of individuals and transactions, and this intermediary wholesaling. And so the data is unbelievably plentiful, but that's not super useful if it's not quality. I think the same is true for your content. You could be a small shop not able to produce the volume of content that we can produce, but if you produce it right, if you're using structured content, if you're thinking about how the content will get consumed by the algorithms on the SEO side and on the Gen AI side of things, you'll win. I think it's quality first, quantity second. All right. I hope that was useful. Thank you all. I appreciate it.